the clipper. It allows us to cut clipper over comb. I'm going to use what I call a panel cutting technique. I start in center back panel number 1 at the center back of the head, and I work up the head form, concentrating my activity and my effort in center back panel number 1. Center back panel number 1 is an area approximately the size of the tooth area of my comb. I'm going to cut panel number 1, and I'm going to cut panel number 1, and I'm going to cut panel number 1, and I'm not going to cut hair anywhere on the head other than panel number 1 until panel number 1 represents a small portion of my finished haircut. Panel number 1 will then become my guide, and I will work around the head. Panel number 2 consists of 50% of previously cut panel number 1 serving as my, and 50% uncut hair living next door. Cosmetology School 101, create a guide, follow the guide, and don't cut the guide. Alright? So we move over, dark hair, light combs, light hair, dark combs. Panel number 2, you see the short hair and the leading edge of the comb as my guide, longer hair next door, and you cut. And you work your way up in a vertical stripe up until you run into the interior. Panel number 3. Panel number 3 is half of panel number 2 and half uncut hair living next door. It's a classic traveling guide. You don't go back to panel number 1 and you move over. Long, smooth, fluid strokes across the entire surface of the comb will yield long, smooth, fluid results on the head. If you chip, 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 you'll chip and chop and you'll get an uneven taper. You want to use long, smooth, fluid strokes across the entire surface of the comb as you work your way up the head form. Generally speaking, on a full-size adult male cranium, it will take anywhere from 4 to 7 vertical sections to get from center back panel number 1 to the back of the ear. What will determine on any given head how many panels we need? Size of the head. What else? The density of the hair. What else? Hair color? Maybe sometimes, because if it's darker and you're having trouble seeing it, you may take smaller sections. Sure, I'll go with that. What else? How about the number of people in the waiting room? If there are more people in the waiting room, do we take fewer, bigger sections?
Bigger sections.
Do we?
Yeah.
Absolutely. In the real world in which I live, if there are more people in the waiting room, we take bigger sections. Absolutely. Notice where he's got some inverted growth direction. Instead of coming up this way on him, I roll that comb over and I come down on it. When I get to the back of the ear, I will stop. I take it from the center back to the back of the ear. I now jump to the area in the front corner. This front corner is a challenge for most folks. It represents what we call a compound taper. I'm going to part the hair, pushing that top front over so I don't accidentally cut what I don't want to. Depending on the degree of recession in the corners, I want to part that over out of the way or segregate it. I want to taper this corner. This is a tough corner because we need to taper from short to long as we travel up on the vertical axis. And we also need to taper from short to long as we travel back along the horizontal axis. Have you ever looked straight ahead at somebody who had a poorly tapered haircut 4 weeks ago? When you look straight ahead at them, you'll see chunks of hair right here in that corner because they were tapered up, but they weren't tapered back. You want to come in